of state institutions, they are meant to behave like institutions of all Zimbabweans and institutions of not of a particular political party. And the recommendation that I will give is that, number one, there is the willpower, right? Those who are in power to ensure that for once as Zimbabweans, we live by the rule of law and not rule by law. The laws should be followed so that they protect each and every person who is there. But number two, that everyone who works for the state should realize that they work for the state, work for the state, work for the people, and therefore should not really associate with the political party.
Thank you very much. Basically, what he's saying is that law is not just law, but a reflection of the stance of the most powerful group in society. If you are a Marxist, that is Marx's view, that law is not law, but a reflection of the stance of the most powerful group in society. And if you follow Makamure, the late, you would say that all the state and law are not independent categories. The state and law are there to serve the ruling elite at a particular historic moment. May Makamure rest in peace. I will proceed to the next intervention.
Thank you. The Chapter 12 institutions in Zimbabwe have been a huge disappointment. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission has got nothing to show to the state. And my question would also go back to the civic society in this country. Have we held the Chapter 12 institutions to account? We haven't. Have we tried to put them in one room and demand accountability? Because they should actually report back to the people of Zimbabwe on what they have achieved. Unfortunately, we have become crybabies on social media spaces or debates. But when it comes to holding the actual commissioners to account, we fall short. Like my colleague here just alluded to, NPRC also has nothing to show after 10 years. We thought that they would deal with the underlying issues to do with reuniting Zimbabwe. Peace, reconciliation. There's a lot that has happened in this country. Long sleeve, short sleeve, gukura hoodie, all that. And there are a lot of wounds that are still burning within the people of Zimbabwe. We have also had the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, which some of us, like me, who believe in gender balance and equality, thought that they would make efforts to ensure operationalization of Section 17 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe and protection of all genders in political activities in this country. But that has not happened as well. So going forward, we realize that the Constitution of Zimbabwe is not yet considered supreme law of this land. Yet Section 2 expressly states that any custom, any practice that is against the Constitution is invalid. What has been our role in demanding accountability, in demanding transparency for these commissions to actually fulfill their mandate as enshrined in the Constitution of Zimbabwe? What we see is selective application of the Constitution. Everyone in the opposition, in the ruling party, the people of Zimbabwe, we just watch these people, yet they've got guidelines and mandates that they're supposed to fulfill, which we have never held them to account. My parting shot is we need to hold them to account. Civic society, please create a platform to bring them into an area, a space where we can demand accountability on whether or not they fulfilled their mandate as enshrined in the Constitution of Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Madam President. She was talking about issues of transitional justice. That there has not been transitional justice in this country. And transitional justice happens in two forms. There's what is called the restorative transitional justice and retributive transitional justice, or where we find trials, or restorative where we find like truth commissions, like what happened in South Africa. He's fundamentally saying that there has not been transitional justice in that political parties, not only the ruling party, but including the opposition in Zimbabwe, have not fostered to address issues of transitional justice in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. I think that we submit that the problem with Chapter 12 institution is in the following respect. Number one is the state military party conflation. In Zimbabwe, it is difficult to separate state institutions from ZANU-PF. I was arrested, in fact, I was abducted at some time back in 2016. And then I was taken to ZANU-PF headquarters and I was tortured there. And then as a revolutionary Marxist, you understand that you must fight the struggle to its logical conclusion. So I was never petrified. But when it was time for me to get justice, I was taken to the police. The police didn't protect me. They further beat me up and I was thrown into Chikurubi maximum prison. When I went to court, so you are moving from a political party torture chamber, you are going into a state institution, which is the police, which is supposed to protect you and arrest the perpetrator, but it further perpetuated the violation. And then you seek again justice from the judiciary. Before the magistrate reads a judgment for our bail condition after staying more than 30 days, the same person who was torturing you comes to court and briefs the magistrate. And the magistrate issues a clear political judgment that bail is denied. So these institutions, according to the law, must be separate. What is called separation of powers? Judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. But in Zimbabwe, it's one thing. And you can't seek redress because of capture. So you are almost like in this one big ZANU-PF house of terror. You are just being moved from one room to another. So to expect that you can move from a police cell to a judicial courtroom to get justice is a difficult thing to fathom and imagine in our jurisdiction. So that is the first problem, the conflation of state institutions and the political part. Number two is the question of executive tyranny. The biggest crisis in this country is an executive that has become the law unto itself. And that is shown by every decision that is being made in this country, which affects the entire political economy of our nation. If you look at the cabinet appointments, it shows an executive that is the law unto itself. If you look at the conduct of judges, if you look at the conduct of ministers in parliament, they are borrowing on behalf of their generation, on behalf of our generation, and on behalf of the unborn. The domestic debt in this country is ballooning, including you will borrow money without parliamentary oversight, despite the constitution being clear that for this amount of money, it only has to be approved through parliament. But the executive will just proceed. So I'm talking about executive tyranny. So in the constitution, there is a separation between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, a state institution. But in reality, it is not. A decision made by the executive, that's why you saw them bragging that and this pressure, I do what I want, I am the head of the executive, so I'll do whatever I want, I'm not accountable to anyone. That is the biggest and second most important problem. Number three is a culture of impunity. So Chapter 12 institutions cannot hold anyone, particularly executive politicians, to account because of impunity. If you look at, there's a minister, an MP in Mashonaland East, that threatened one of the presidential candidates, our presidential candidate, and the winning president in this country, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. He made clear threats that Chamisa must be killed. You are threatening an incoming head of state. Nothing happens to you. There is this one, Barbara Rhodes. He calls the police office. She calls the police office. Threatens the police office. Instead of Barbara running away, it is the police officer who runs away. Despite that, the officer is clear in terms of what the law says. You move from there, there is this other thief, the fake prophet. They steal from the poor There is a documentary exposing them, taking out money illicit in that fashion, removing gold, exploiting investors and so forth. Prophet, and then that person who's supposed to be arrested by that, a chapter 12 institution, is actually rewarded. You see with the head of state in the United Nations. So what happens when you steal? They say to you, no, you have been caught in the ministry of lands. Now we move you so that you go and steal in the ministry of health. So impunity, rewarding of thievery and rewarding of people who are breaching the law is the reason why chapter 12 institutions cannot be effective, because there are people who are immune and there are people who are not punishable by the law in this country. Thank you.
That's an intervention before we allow Comrade Masaraure to speak. Law is law, whether good or bad. Is that also Mr. Mandiri? So going by that definition, whether we like it or not, whether political parties yes like it or not, the head of state and president is Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa in terms of the law. Is that not so? Law is law, whether good or bad. That is what we call a positivist approach to law. Yeah, this is what, yes. That is what the law says. No, this is not a rally. This is not a rally. I like that. Comrades, let me finish. Let me finish. Yes, that is what the law says. Law is law, whether good or bad. And the law is a command issued by the sovereign, which citizens generally are obedient to. That is what the law is. Yes, you are entitled to your other view, but we are talking about the positivist approach to law. Mr. Mandile, is that not the correct position? From a positivist approach. So, but what Costello was talking about is what we call conflation of the state and party. The party-state conflation is a major issue. And according to Kaboro talks about rule by substitution, where the president is the party is the government is the state, and everything is conflated. But I want to add what Jausile Shumba, in his thesis 2011, he says that in Zimbabwe we have a problem of what he calls party-state business military complex. And those things are conflated to the extent that we don't know who is who. Having said that, I will proceed to president. We used to call him president, but now he's the spokesperson of crisis.
Thank you so much, Mkomarwanya. But I will begin with reminding colleagues here to revisit the statements of one Edison Sobo when he was saying, when we liberate this country, we don't want our people to barricade their homes during the night because they are afraid of their own state. Comrades, are you sure that you are not barricading your homes? If you are going to ask this question to Wombe Rainende today, did you sleep at home peacefully, knowing that my state can take care of me? If you are going to ask me the question, my answer will be the negative. Because for 2 times, the state is led by Emerson Mnangagwa, broke into my home, tortured me, at some point left me for dead. So these are the state institutions as inherited from the colonial settlement, from the colonial regime of Ian Smith. We still have the UDI problem today. We would have expected that now we are pushing for a liberated Zimbabwe. We are going to see some transformation in how our state institutions are run. But in as much as they were preserving the rule of Ian Douglas Smith before independence, they are doing the same today, bidding for the ruling ZANU-PF party. Now we have a crisis when we start to be troubled, accuse each other of not doing enough to lobby. You can't lobby these people. What is needed in Zimbabwe is a revolution. where we can then transform, because the 1980 revolution was aborted. Because it was supposed then to transform these state institutions from serving white minority rule to serve the majority of the people of Zimbabwe. But then the ZANU-PF managed then to make sure that that transition was never going to be a reality. And it's very unfortunate that today you can speak of Matanda Moyo to say she can deal with corruption. You can speak of whoever you want to speak about, say they can be able to bring reconciliation in Zimbabwe. But yet we know that these people were appointed to frustrate the whole process that was espoused in the constitution. Because that they was forced into a constitutional settlement during the GNU. They never wanted the constitution. And whatever they are doing today is to frustrate the implementation of the same constitution. So what is needed at the moment is to say, how do we transform these institutions which are under a strong grip of ZANU-PF? Are we going to ask the kind lead ZANU-PF to say, comrades, this is maybe time to talk, we can have a good discussion with them and allow them to let go, or it's time really to go for a revolution and push them out and then reform the institutions? So we have to pick in every one choice. We have a clear path of reforming these state institutions. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have. And Ita Zamara today will tell you that the state, as it is today, the state institutions are not reliable, are not for the people, but are for those who are ruling today.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Like I said, we used to call you President. You remind me of the book written by Edson Jonas Mudadiru-Washogbo. Edson Jonas Mudadiru-Washogbo was a ZANU-PF politician and an academic lawyer. He wrote a book in 1976, published in Sydney, Australia, called The Law as an Instrument of Oppression in Southern Rhodesia. And on page 30 of that book, Zogo says this: in Southern Rhodesia, a prison is a place where big criminals keep smaller ones. That was Zogo 1976 book published in Australia, Sydney, called The Law as an Instrument of Oppression in Southern Rhodesia. And on page 30 he says, in Southern Rhodesia, a prison is a place where big criminals keep smaller ones. I don't know what the state of affairs since 1976 when he wrote that book. What is the status quo today? It's up to you as colleagues to discuss whether we have that kind of status quo. Now, the third question we are dealing with is that in the past, following the 2008 elections, in which for the first time the opposition won parliament and the first speaker of parliament in the history of Zimbabwe since 1980, who was called Love Momoyo. The first election in March was won by the late Morgan Tsvangirai. And then we went for the June 2008 election, which was rejected by the African Union, which led to the negotiations led by former South African President Mbeki, leading to the GNU. So there was a GNU, which was a result of disputed election. So in the current context, there are different views by different people. Some who are saying we need dialogue. So the question is, what kind of dialogue do we need? I want to pose to the panelists. Do we support, do you guys as political parties and civil society organizations, do you support national dialogue at this juncture? If yes, what should be the key focus areas? Who should convene it? Who should be part of that process? What should be the end goal of that process if it were to take place? Let me start from here. This time around, I give you 60 seconds only.
Thank you so much. I've been good with the time. So I think to begin with, when we say we want dialogue, it's this is what we all want, and the objectives have to be set clearly. In Sudan, they set the objectives, like they turned points to say we need national dialogue, and they had the points clearly. But there was motivation for dialogue. There was an incentive for dialogue. We all want dialogue, but that kind of dialogue is not going to be the 1987 dialogue. It's not going to be the 2008 kind of dialogue. It is going to be dialogue which is more inclusive, which is not for political players who are thinking that maybe
10 seconds. Proceed from it.
but you were obstructing the process. Okay. So what we are simply demanding is that if there is going to be dialogue, it should be inclusive dialogue. And the genesis of dialogue is through consultation so that it has legitimacy. You can't sit in one room because you saw elections from each other. Maybe Mnangagwa saw an election from Chamisa. We don't expect Chamisa and Emerson Mnangagwa to sit in one room and say, comrades, we have now agreed that this is now the roadmap for Zimbabwe. We have seen from the past that this has failed consistently because people, when they get in those rooms, they have the tendency of forgetting those who were running behind them. So we want a dialogue which is very legitimate from the grassroots to say everyone would feel that we are included. But what are the objectives for dialogue in Zimbabwe? The key objectives for me, speaking at the moment, is to say the pocket of the ordinary person who can't even buy mealie meal tonight. What is the immediate solution? Because we don't want dialogue that will prolong the suffering of our people. The second issue is to say, how do we ensure that the next time we hold an election, it is not going to be disputed? We have held disputed elections for a very long time. This is the kind of dialogue that we want, and we have a better footing because we have a constitution that we are also going to be dialoguing on point number 3. To say at least it's not a perfect document, but let's ensure that it is a document that we all respect and go ahead with as a dialoguing point. As a fourth dialoguing point, we are looking at to say, we have people who were killed in 2008, where people were killed during Bukra. How do we restore? How do we ensure that those people are no longer grieved? How do we ensure that we compensate the victims, and there's truth-telling, and the state of which was the perpetrator can also apologize. So when we are talking of dialogue, it is not going to be initiated by this head of state. Well, this head of state, we know from his history that is not a sincere man. We know from his history that is very selfish. We need dialogue that can, at the least, be mediated by externals, maybe AU and such that, but the kind of color like that is not acceptable, and at the end of the day, it will not take us anywhere.
Thank you very much. Our position as Triple C is very clear. It is informed by our historical and ideological understanding that every revolution, every war, whether violent or non-violent, ends on the negotiation table. Whatever route we will take to resolve the political crisis in this country, at the end of the day, we will all have to sit down and agree on the path that Zimbabwe must take. Now, for us, the reason why there must be a political settlement in Zimbabwe is because since 1980, Zimbabwe has been gripped by vicious cycles of disputed elections. Elections have left Zimbabwean society divided than united. Why? Because they are not being conducted in a manner prescribed for by the law of the country. So dialogue has to be a process that takes Zimbabwe back to the road to legitimacy. How do we exit from that crisis? We must dialogue and converse to agree on a roadmap to go back into a fresh election. Because this current class of 2023 has no mandate of the people, has no mandate of the ordinary people. That's why, Prof, you saw people, that's why you saw them, Comrade Linda, the people attending here, being a sample of the Zimbabwean ordinary population, rejecting the assumption that the current occupant of #1 Chancellor Avenue is the legitimate will of the people. Why? Those who govern, to clarify and help my sister is a student of modern scientific thought. You can be in government because you have got the will of the state, not of the people. But in a democracy, so those with the mandate of the people have no means, and those with the means have no mandate from the people. That's why Zimbabwe suffers from what philosophers call a broken down social contract. There is no relationship between those who govern and those that are being governed. That's why when they announced the gentleman which is occupying State House right now, Zimbabweans were almost mourning because they know that what was announced by ZEC is not the reflection of what they put on the ballot. So dialogue must be a dialogue to go back into a road of producing a leader that is born out of the will of the people. That is what dialogue must be all about. We must go back into the road of a credible election that will produce a credible leadership. So that next time when we go to UN, we don't address chairs, but we address other issues of chairs. Thank you.
I wanted to respond to you, Comrade Ostalos, but I will not at this juncture. Because it's ingatotanga iwe. I will respond to Comrade Ruai. I think one of the biggest problems we've had in Zimbabwe is thinking that the redemption that we need is going to come from elections. Because it is not going to come from elections. The GNU was actually a clearer picture of the political leaders we have in this country. When the opposition went into the GNU, they had an opportunity to fix a lot of things, but they didn't. They also joined the bandwagon of primitive accumulation of wealth. They forgot about electoral reforms, they forgot about labor justice, they forgot about the things that they promised the people of Zimbabwe. I always say this, that our biggest crisis in this country is the governance system that we adopted from the Smith regime. That is repressive, oppressive, and suppressive. I'll give an example. During the GNU era, when I was employed at the National Railways of Zimbabwe, we had a labor action, we had a strike. We were arrested, taken to court, took our issue to labor court, and the labor minister was from the MDC then. We had a real case before the courts of law. We had gone for 11 months with no salary, but the labor minister gave us a show cause order. I speak about the issue of the governance system because it is an issue that our politicians do not want to talk about. Because everyone wants that governance system in place so that they get in, they'll also use it to suppress the then opposition. I'll give an example. Just this week, Edgar Lungu was stopped from jogging in Zambia by a former opposition who is now the ruling party. Everyone gets in, uses the same oppressive, repressive system to oppress those who are oppressing or repressing them back in. If we are sincere that we want change, genuine change in this country, the conversation henceforth should start on how we can transition from the governance system we are using, we adopted from the Smith regime, to a governance system that is inclusive, that benefits all the people of Zimbabwe, and not just those in politics or those in power. So what we need is a broad-based, inclusive, and participatory dialogue that includes labor, student unions, civic society, the church, politicians, etc., etc. For me, this thing of saying dialogue should happen between politicians is a recipe for disaster. Because almost all politicians are self-serving. That is the reality. They will tell you what they want to hear, but will never give you what you want. So at the end of the day, that dialogue that we want should end all forms of violence, redefine and re-establish strong nation-building programs, strengthen the social contract between the people of Zimbabwe and the state, settle historical disputes and all sources of conflicts. What we need at the end of the day is inclusive national development and economic recovery. A dialogue that will not include Matumbu Elani and wealth creation and job creation are useless. People have been conditioned to just think of the president in courts and we forget about self. So this dialogue that we're talking about should include even the informal sector. Monwese should be part of this dialogue for us to save Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Chair, I almost said I have no comment. I want to agree with President Linda. My point basically is I have written here that inclusive dialogue, it has to be inclusive dialogue for sustainable democracy and peace. I was going to speak to the issue that when we are going to have any sort of form of dialogue, then it's the table for everyone. And I think President Linda also came up with a comprehensive list in which he excluded women, youth, religious leaders, civil society, among others. But the issue at the end of the day is I want to agree also even with spokesperson who mentions the issue that we can no longer trust the political parties to go on the table and converse on their own. There is no dialogue without us. The issue is whenever we are, there is going to be dialogue. The dialogue is about us, and it is going to be about us, but also it is going to be with us. One of the mistakes which happened after the inclusive process of 2013, which led to the current 2013 constitution, was the fact that immediately thereafter, I'd hoped to see one Guinness Mawarire so that you continue to answer for his sins. But one of his many sins is that he went to the court then, constitutional court, sued the president then to compel the holding of an election after the constitution, and yet we had not put in place any transitional mechanism to ensure that all the functions, all the commissions, all the things which we desired the constitution to be able to do for us as Zimbabweans would be done. Belatedly, we saw religious leaders then trying to come up, I think, the last 3-4 years, to declare a Sabbath or a moratorium on elections. But the issue is, I think we needed those in 2013. At that particular time, I think even the power matrix was such that we did not have an absolute leader. There was always going to be some negotiations which was taking place. Yes, other political parties were crying foul because they also wanted to be on the table. And yet, at that particular time, we believe the situation then was a little bit better because it was conducive for us to have continued in a trajectory in which we would then have operationalized our constitution and ensured that by the time we possibly would have arrived to this particular area, things would have been balanced everywhere. Not the situation we currently find ourselves in, where I think the judgment in Delas Mawarire took us back to almost a one-party state.
Thank you very much. I'll give each of you 30 seconds to address the last questions. I will make it a hybrid question. And this is to do with what would be the role of regional and international bodies, if any, in any form of dialogue or conversations around the Zimbabwe question. We're talking about the AU, we're talking about SADC, that's one thing. And the second question is, what will be the role of an ordinary person in Gandanzara, in Cholocho, in Gwanda? What is the role of those who cannot come to these public spaces, who may not be able to be on the negotiating table? Like Linda was talking, Linda raised a very important question on the issue that any kind of dialogue should not be elite-based. And she talked about critical sectors of the economy that is to be represented in such kind of conversation. She talked about the informal sector and fundamentally the role of women. If you are doing any form of discussion in any form of conversation that do not address the gender question, it is political tomfoolery. You are not addressing anything. So on that point, the Community President, you raised a fundamental issue on the question of the gender question and the informal question, the informal sector. This is where the economy, if 90% of Zimbabweans are not employed, the question is, where is this 90%? Where are their voices? How do you bring them aboard, these people who are not employed? So I'll give you 30 seconds each to address the role of international community and the role of ordinary people in any form of conversation before we allow colleagues to interact with you. I will start with you.
In the first 15 seconds, I will mention the role of the international community as well as the regional community. Their role is basically to bring together us as Zimbabweans. Their role is to recognize what has to be recognized and ensure that delegitimize that which has to be delegitimized. You cannot have a situation in which people can treat the situation in Zimbabwe as business as usual. This is business unusual. And we want the international community to come to that particular realization that things in Zim are not usual, that things in Zim need to be regularized, and that they have a role to bring us together. But in the last 15 seconds, I speak about the grandmothers, our brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, and friends in the rural areas far away from Harare. And I say we need the processes to be inclusive. We need to include them. I think one of the best examples I can give is what we saw the COPAC process do. I observed the COPAC process myself. I think I traveled far and wide, deep into the rural areas, where I saw processes are being undertaken. Yes, there are arguments that they might have been manipulated at the end of the day, but the voices were heard. We heard them say, yes, we heard them being taught from time to time, being trained on what to say, but they also had an opportunity to be able to speak, and we would want this process to include them too, not to decide for them. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mazinga. Thank you.
For me, all these international bodies are toothless bulldogs. And I think if we're going to get to a stage where we are going to fix the problems bedeviling Zimbabwe, we have to do it our own way. We have to define what it is that we need going forward. We need to make sure that we go the organic route, having everyone involved. There are a lot of people that have been excluded in processes in this country. We've got people in traditional leadership that are always marginalized and sidelined. I've asked this question in various spaces: where are the sub-boss? Where are the headsmen? They are not involved in these conversations. And yet we also forget that almost 70% of the electorate resides in rural areas. But when we have these debates, they are mainly for the urbanites. And they do not have the exposure that we also have. So when we talk about trying to engage SADC, SADC has always been on the side of the ruling party, from my perspective. We have had multilateral institutions across the world that have always been serving their interests in what they want to get out of Zimbabwe, and not what is beneficial to the people of Zimbabwe. And if we want to get to a stage where we are going to get things that benefit us as native Zimbabweans, we have to define that trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a fundamental difference in the point of departure on understanding of diplomacy and the role of SADC. No country can exist in isolation. We are member states of SADC. We are member states of the African Union. It was created to make sure that we coexist, because no country can exist in isolation. SADC has taken a very firm and a clear position on the side of the people that the election in Zimbabwe was flawed and that the election didn't meet the SADC guidelines on democratic elections. And that's an important starting point on the role of the international community to help Zimbabweans find each other, because there is a dark cloud of uncertainty in this country. There's a sharp division and contradictions amongst the major political organizations. And therefore, there must be a conversation, but that conversation must be scaffolded by SADC, because it is part of its duty, it is part of its mandate to help its member states resolve conflicts. That is the role of SADC, that is the role of the African Union. And that's why in wars on countries you see SADC sending troops, because that is the mandate of SADC, the African Union, and any union that a country would have signed a treaty to be. So it is important the international community plays an important role in making sure that they help Zimbabweans. But of course, we have our own domestic, moral, and political responsibilities as Zimbabweans, so that we resolve the crisis we are facing. Ordinary people, for us, are very important, and to have said this for avoidance of doubt, we have said as CCC, a dialogue that must happen is an all-inclusive process. All-inclusive means it must not just be a process of political elites, it must be a process that includes members of society through their representative capacities, residents, vendors, trade unions, students, bankers, the middle class, professionals, and everyone, so that we are able to produce a legitimate outcome. So we are very clear as an alternative that the dialogue must be about Zimbabwe, so that whatever comes out of that process is collective and is agreeable by Zimbabweans, and ordinary people will be represented by different platforms where they belong. And the church is an important player in that particular role. Not obviously these men of the clergy that have been spewed dross about political parties accepting any legitimate outcome. That's not what we expect. The clergy and the church must be able to play an important role as a moral and neutral arbiter, not taking the side of any of the afflicted parties. Thank you.
The same way we expected Samora Machel to risk the economy of Mozambique, housing our people to fight for the liberation of this republic, Kaunda to house our liberation fighters in Zambia. It is the same way we still trust SADC today to say when we have a crisis in Zimbabwe, it is our own region that can help to resolve the Zimbabwean crisis. It will be very unfortunate to then try to approach a divided international community. We know it's seized in contradictions and conflicts at the moment without solid support in the region. So it will be very unfortunate if Zimbabweans would choose to disregard their own SADC and choose to try to wag their tail maybe towards the west or the east, disregarding home, because Zimbabwe is a small republic that can easily be torn apart if it gets engulfed in the international conflict. So we trust the region to play the same role it did when they assisted us to wage a liberty struggle. They can still assist us in our transition to a democratic dispensation. And when we come back at home, it is mandatory that nothing should be done for the people without the input of those same ordinary people. It is the people who desperately need a solution to the crisis, and we should expect the mothers in Uzumba, Maramba, Fungwe, the mothers in Lutito to be heard when we dialogue on the way forward of this republic. No one owns this country. You can own your money, but not a whole country. These are individual people with sovereign rights to speak for themselves. Whenever decisions are made, no one can make decisions for them.
Thank you very much, our esteemed panelists. I think we had a very civil conversation so far, which is what we expect from such kind of dialogues. Now, it is time for you, colleagues, to fire questions to our colleagues. We are not expecting people to make presentations. Just a short question to these comrades, so that they appreciate the other view. So I will start with you, my friend. I'll take 3 questions. Short and precise.
My question goes to President Linda. I think President Linda has been very specific when it comes to the issue of everyone participating in the dialogue. But then my question now, coming to you, President Linda, I think it's not just about trying to have everyone participating in the dialogue, because you don't want to end up having 40 people in the same dialogue. Like, for example, if that door was to be closed, and we'd all agree on which is a better team, Manchester City or Arsenal, that would go on the whole day and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So if we're ever going to go into a dialogue, we need people that matter. The challenge that was there with the dialogue that we had in 2014 was there was only one challenge when it came to that JNU. You had people that were representing no one, sitting on a table negotiating on behalf of no one. It's like the same thing as saying that Poland is discussing on behalf of people. If you only remove one person, according to ZEG, anyone else who was involved in the last Poland did not even reach 2%, all those people combined. And how can such people be there? And how can such people be there trying to represent? Who are they representing? I think that then becomes my question to you. Who do you think really matters to be there in the dialogue? Because someone must not just participate in a dialogue for the sake of being a dialogue. You mentioned the informal sector. Do you think State Forward deserves to be in the dialogue, in the national dialogue? For what? No.
Thank you very much. Next time, I want a short one, but to ask a very brilliant question. But only to correct you, let's address the president of it as President Linda Masarira, not President Linda, President Masarira. That, yeah, we need to do that and respect each other. You guys, if I was president, would you say President Bates, you will say President Lang. Let's do that. Let's not, let's respect each other. Next question. Next question.
Thank you very much. My question goes to lead President Linda Masarira. You have talked about the issue of toxicity that's affecting our nation. My question is, I've seen you on Twitter, you have downplayed a lot of abductions, saying there's well-coordinated and systematic abductions in Zimbabwe. And sometime back in 2018, you talked about people being trained outside the country. Do you have like any evidence to back that? Isn't that part of toxicity?
Third question. Is there a need? Is there a need to the question? A lead to the question. One inclusive. Are you ready? Okay, I'll allow you to. Just a joke.
All right, thank you. My question again, I think, is directed to President Masarira. So we are talking about inclusivity and everything. First, I think you're part of the Pollard group, and I would want to know, in brief, just some achievements, if any, that were drawn from Pollard. Because what we saw was we saw them spending taxpayers' money and everything. So I would want to have just a brief of any achievements, if any, if there are any, so that we get an understanding of why we are involving certain people who, according to him and the sentiments that I do echo, they practically represent next to no one, except maybe their friends or families and group of their workers. So I would want to know it.
Thank you very much. Because the three questions are directed at President Masarira, I will allow others with questions for the other colleagues, if they are, so that they will answer at once.
Thank you. My question directed to Mr. Matinde. Right. My question comes from the background that our constitution has been developed through the COPAC, which was a consensus building process. So my understanding of a legal document is just a legal moral, which has to be protected. Is it the question of the moral, or is the question of implementing an interpretation of that moral? Are we having a problem of the legal part? We are having a problem in terms of interpreting what has been written down. Thank you.
The last one.
Yeah, inini mvunzo wangu wakanangana na President Masarira. Vakaona paTwitter mazuva akupfuura vachitaura nemumwe president wakandida vachiti imimi mukoma imimi dai matorega zvematongerwo enyika manoita zvechange nokudoko kwakufitana. Vanga vachitaura nenyaya dzekuti politics dzedu dziri toxic zvakanyanya zvekuti hatisi kugona kubatana, but iwo state yekuti munhu ari kutidzvinyirira ataurwe nezvake, ivo vari kunangana neumwe ari kuchema-chemawo neutsvanyiriri. Hatizivi kuti
Thank you very much. I will allow Comrade Masarira to address your question, then Ms. Matinde will address it.
Okay, to my brother who asked the first question, one of the tragedies we have had as a people is thinking that we are less important. Everyone matters, and every voice matters if we are going to transform Zimbabwe to ensure sustainable human development and sustainable economic growth. The moment we think that we are demigods who are just supposed to do everything for us, we will always find ourselves left behind because we're expecting someone to feel the heat beneath the frying pan when they are not even there where the heat is coming from. Representatives of the sectors that I spoke about should go and sit at that broad-based national dialogue. Vendors have got their own vendor organizations. Plenty of them have got VSET by Semuadai. I think there are plenty of our vendor associations that know the issues that are affecting vendors. We've got a lot of women organizations. We've got a lot of trade unions. We've got a lot of student unions. And every sector should be represented in this national dialogue for it to be able to benefit every sector of the economy and society of Zimbabwe. And like I alluded earlier on, I've realized that there are sectors that are structurally marginalized in this country. And it's usually the people from rural areas. My society, they should also have a voice in what is happening in this country. And they are also equally important. But if we get to a stage of thinking that only the people in the urban areas matter, we'll be getting it all wrong. The dialogue that I'm speaking about should just not be at national level. It should cascade into the constituencies, into the wards, right down to the grassroots. Point to a consensus building through dialogue. This is what the people of Zimbabwe want. As it stands, we do not have a collective position as Zimbabweans on what we want. What we want is being defined by us, by our different political leaders, which is the wrong footplate of how we are supposed to be solving our problems in this country. Our problems are supposed to start being highlighted, identified by those at the grassroots, so that we find a solution that works for every Zimbabwean, regardless of class in the society. My second response goes to the issue of Pollard. Linda Tsungirirai Masarira has never been part of Pollard. Contrary to the propaganda that I continuously see being written by the media in this country, being said by fellow politicians, activists, and plenty of you in here. Pollard was constituted by people who participated as presidential candidates in 2018. In 2018, I ran for another central MP seat, and thus have no mandate whatsoever to be in Pollard. Most people thought that I'm in Pollard because there was a call for us to go and get vaccinated as a show of courage that vaccination is all right. And when we went to Victoria Falls, everyone started labeling me a Pollard member. I am not a Pollard member. I never got a Pollard vehicle. I do not even get Pollard allowances. I do not sit in Pollard meetings. I am tired of saying the same thing over and over again about the propaganda some of you created to tarnish my image, to say Linda is part of ZANU-PF, she's speaking for that. I've heard a lot, but I don't care because I shouldn't miss it. I shouldn't let this around. And this is what people are doing. Munoti tukira pasina, muchitawira pasina, muchipipira pasina, and nandinandani. Nekuti ndozva makazvudza mukafunga, and I cannot answer on behalf of Pollard. Doenda kunyaya yema-abductions nema-training. Vaostalo sisiziva vari pana. Hamuna kuende kuCape Town nemuZambia. Vachapinda. Vaopeti vasaraure vari pano. I am not using anyone's name in vain because every time I ask my people, let me finish this. They want to get emotional or what? My trainings, akaitwa, takabasuka pastage, vanhu vabudisa mapassport avo, yotaura nemamanzi acho. Vati ndimu noramba muchitaura kuti Linda anonyepa. Linda says this. Tabva ipapo panyemba kuti ndimu nemudikuza mubvunzo muchindituka, vanhu vanotsvaka kutsamwa tikazoti nomwe nyaya dzacho. Inini ndakasiya nyaya ndikaipera, ndikati yapera kudhara. Vati mukada kuramba muchiimutsa ichazongoti ningi gawabudisa mapassport emangi akati ningi topedza nyaya yacho. Moona kuti Linda haana kungodhura kare vachinema. Ndapedza ndoenda kunyaya yekuzanzi ndoita downplay ma-abduction, ndoita downplay zvakati. every time there's an international sitting, opposition, the main opposition is going to have to create that future conflict. Could I justify it to nominate as not Ramush?
You see, you can order, comrade. Hey, order, Sit down. Order. This is not the kind of conversation we want. The police are here, they will respond. Hey, order. Here's the right to say what she order. Madam Azara has the right to say her views. And will give others to say views the contrary. For example, you don't have to do what you're saying. So what you are now going to do, before I call the director of Heal Zimbabwe, hey, my friend, no more questions. So this is not a run. You have no right to harass anybody. It is up to me to put this out for order. And you cannot threaten anyone. You cannot threaten a journalist, you cannot threaten any citizen, you cannot threaten any person. This is not the purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is peaceful coexistence. Yeah, if there is this is not a run.
is to apologize. No. January is not you. And it's not what if there are issues, I will be able to address this. But anyone must believe this. Without being threatened by anyone. No. You are forgotten. So what we are going to do now is to allow our comrades that are in front there to make last summary of their voice. Then we allow the director of Heal Zimbabwe to give a lot of things. So what we are going to do is to allow the comrades in front to give a summary of our proceedings. But you know, our Zimbabweans, tomorrow I'm saying, so to go there, all right. So I'm now going to give the last round, just 30 minutes. Obviously, we have to say what you want. Without the standard, you know. I know you can do much better. So I will start with Mr. Mantinde. Then we go around, then we allow the director of Heal Zimbabwe to close the meeting.
Did you say 30 minutes so that I can start now?
No, not 30 minutes. 10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. As I wind up, I will possibly also take an opportunity to respond to the one question that had been asked to me. But the issue really goes to the role of COPAC, the constitution that we got as Zimbabwe, and how it is being interpreted. I think from the constitutional court and from our courts, we have received very good judgments. I think there are judgments to do with the aspect of the banning child marriages. We have had the constitutional courts declaring issues to do with corporal punishment. We also have had the constitutional court dealing with a few other issues. But we must also say we have also had the constitutional court apply what I opted to call the doctrine of avoidance, where the constitutional court has deliberately not come up with decisions as and when they are due. We saw that happening especially during the just ended elections. I think the Xavier Kasukwere matter is an example where the doctrine of avoidance was applied, where the courts will not come up with a proper decision, but we will come or dwell on technicalities so as not to review on the merits of a matter. So those are some of the issues. Some of my colleagues in the political parties in particular have opted to use the term that there is what we call judicial capture. As legal practitioners ourselves, we are afraid of using that particular term because we continue appearing before the courts. So we do not want to be taken to task to then have to answer for such questions, for such issues, but that's basically what other people choose to deal with. Therefore, but as we wind up in terms of my parting shots today, I just re-emphasize the fact that at the moment we spoke about lack of peace, we need peace in this country. At the moment, we need to find each other as Zimbabweans. And at the moment, the issue of dialogue is necessary, and it's something that is not going to happen without us as Zimbabweans. We need to be included, all of us as Zimbabweans, from wherever, Maramba Pungwe, Uzumba, Gokwe, Binga, Choloche, Lopani, Kimandimani, Mondoro, etc., everyone has to be represented on the table. Thank you. I think those will be my particular.
Thank you, Mr. Mandini. You a doctrine. Musandishore, you know the doctrine of effectiveness in constitutional law. Doctrine of effectiveness, yakabana kuti ndikati pamba pako iwewe. Ndikati ndindatova pano, vana vepamba vatoti vachoti baba, ndichitopulaya roya baba, ndichitoti ndindatova baba yepamba. Doctrine of effectiveness. Ndikauyapo kana ndisheni yako kana mureza state masters. Don't need that to president wezarasi. Masters don't president Rwanya and what really Jawedu vachitodini ndinokuita zvese, ndinoti inonzi doctrine of effectiveness. Inoanza kuti vane vanoita mamilitary coup aya, munhu akaita military coup, even chizoate military coup is unconstitutional. Asi uyo anenge aita coup yavanhu vakatanga kuti nguvati president achioni mutageja achitoichea makabinet achi no atochi inonzi doctrine of effectiveness.
Okay, my parting shot We have to maintain peace always. I'm one person who does not subscribe to the doctrine of despondency and anarchy. We saw great nations fall, like Libya, because of despondency and anarchy. We need to save Zimbabwe from doom. No Zimbabwean deserves to die for a politician. What we need to do is to ensure that we get every Zimbabwean to be peaceful as we try to find means to transition, to change the government. Kana ini ZANU-PF yati handitoidewo, asi kuti tisupporte dispondency.
Thank you very much. Let me obviously register my displeasure against, I'm a spokesperson of the alternative government, and part of my responsibility is to protect members of the media. So at times when they see us, they exercise their freedom to, is slaughter, because we protect them. And it's a non-negotiable position for some of us, because the media must be protected. But I see that people have tempers, but you have just had hallucinations and delusions of grandeur. And such delusions of grandeur are not a new phenomenon in the Zimbabwean body politic. People travel across the world, people do whatever they do, they've got freedom. But the danger, let me say this for posterity, so that the history records is very clear. And for revolutionaries here, when you sell your soul to the devil, the immediate thing that departs is common sense. That is the immediate thing that departs. So triggers and trappings of dictatorship, they have done that, and history is awash. I'm a student of history. Why I'm not shocked about such is because I read upon my history. I understand that history has a tendency of repeating itself. You know that Congress were killed during the liberation struggle because of a person called Albert Nyati. You know that people sell a revolution for triggers and trappings of fascism and dictatorship. And people, the unfortunate thing is that people die, people get arrested on the basis of fabricated hallucinations. But for some of us now, and let the history know it, when we joined the democratic opposition politics, we were conscious that this struggle will require us to be ideologically astute, so that we don't sell the revolution, so that we don't abandon the ordinary people, so that we suffer the consequences. This is not the first time, because that a few weeks ago, I was charged with inciting violence because of wearing Highlanders t-shirt. There is always going to be victimization. But when they give us blows, to us it is water to the revolution. And when we die, we know that we didn't abandon the revolution. We left a mark in the annals of history that the people must be free. That's why we are not scared. That's why we are not petrified. Jail is part of the revolution. Jail is part of the struggle. And there are always going to be those that aid jailing of genuine Democrats, genuine revolutionaries. Do you know that Prof. in our yesterday movement, as I conclude, some of our legitimate members of parliament were elected by people, were recalled by some who went to the bed with the regime. But look, dictatorship will always have that. They will take you, they will use you, you abandon the struggle. And just like that other thing that people use during their private time, you'll be used and be done. That is the nature of fascism. So we are not worried. We are focused on the genuine. And the genuine concentration for some of us is that our people must be free. That our people, as long as our people still live a life worse than the dogs of the rich, we're going to fight dictatorship. Whatever blows come, whatever fabrication come, whether they charge us with rape, whether they charge us with insurgency, whether they charge us with treason. Mandela stayed in prison. Revolutionaries like Togo Garak, Nikita Mangena, they stayed in prison for this freedom that we are talking about. So these are part and parcel of the bruises that oil our national democratic revolution, and we are not flabbergasted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think maybe my participants, I think there is an issue where comrades are saying, how did we get everyone to be dialoguing? I think it is important for us to understand the stages of dialogue, that we have a stage for consultation. Then some people will get a mandate, they will get legitimacy to go to the stage of conferencing. So we are not going to say people come to Zoom by conference in Harare to discuss what's the way forward, but there should be a legitimate process of genuine consultation. And then some people are going to get legitimacy from their different sectors. Then they'll bring the issues from their sectors to the conferencing table, representing at least a particular community. But obviously, when I responded to some issues, they were not issues, but they were insults. We should never confuse insults and issues. When we come here, we're all taught to be civilized. And I understand that some people are trapped, they are prisoners because they chose to sell out their souls. They are prisoners, and they will try at every point in time to say things that they're expected to say. Just for the record, let me make it very clear. I know that people are conferencing right now, some in Europe, some elsewhere, and other comrades on this panel, even those who claim that they don't want to be part of meetings. A meeting is not a training. You attend a meeting, that's all. But it's so dangerous for us to allow some individuals to come and say they were trained. Because when some state agents in this room know that I was trained, I become an enemy and they can do anything to me. So I was trying to correct that anomaly. But I understand these prisoners. They are captured, they're trying to parrot what they're expected to be parroting now and again. But now when you try, then when you engage in political harlotry, then you try to copy and paste your formula to everyone. It's not everyone who is engaging in fake news and lies. Like the way we used to donate to one of our comrades on this panel, when she would pretend that she has been involved in one issue, one calamity or the other, but we knew she was heading to a bar to drink here next year. But we used to donate religiously. Now she assumes that this is the same formula and template used by everyone. Some of us, we are here genuinely. We believe that Zimbabwe can be transformed for the benefit of everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Apart from the fact that when we are having this kind of discussion, we want to interact at the level of ideas. So it is very important that we don't take things personal. Zimbabwe is for everyone. We must deal with issues, and we must desist from taking personal attacks against each other. Usually, if I'm moderating, I remove my other hands that we all know and try to be straightforward and try to be neutral. So when my brother comes here, I don't expect him to be attacked. When President Linda comes here, President Masarika comes here, she needs to feel at home to express her views without ambiguity, without fear, without people booing, this and that. Because the moment you do that, they will desist from coming to these meetings. And it is not useful for you to converse with the like-minded. You need to hear the other views and interact with them at the level of contestation of ideas. You must be successful or victorious because you raise a bigger point, not because you boo someone or you insult someone. Usually when we are in these spaces, we need people to be free. We need people not to be harassed. I want to thank you for listening to these colleagues. But next time when we have meetings, let's just respect each other. No matter how much, Shakespeare, I'm a student of literature. In his writings, Shakespeare always contemplates the strong conflict between reason and emotion and the disorder that arises when reason is obliterated or when reason is defeated. Each time there is a struggle or a fight between reason and emotion, and when reason is defeated, there is going to be chaos. In most cases, we have been victims of violence because you have much reasoning. You are more logical. You will be talking about peace, but those who are weak, who cannot consume your rationality, usually resort to attacking you, abducting you, because they have the superior intellect, because they have superior ideas. These are the things that we defeat me at the level of ideas. Don't defeat me at the level of insulting me, or giving me levels. Give me a high point. We are all schools. We know one or two things. The media is very important in things that we do. Even if we do not agree, that is the whole purpose of not agreeing. If we are agreeing, why do we come here? I want to thank you very much for giving these guys an opportunity to speak. Now I call upon the director of Heal Zimbabwe to give us a lot of things. But thank you very much for what you've done and for your conduct.
Can we give a round of applause to Professor Wanya? A round of applause to our panelists. It's not loud enough. A round of applause, very loud. Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to thank the panelists, all of them, 4 of them, for coming and sharing their views. The views, they differ. We at Heal Zimbabwe, we are campaigning for a society that is tolerant of different views, right? We are born different, with different ideas, different perceptions around everything, political, social, and economic. So we need to be able to tolerate this difference in ideas, right? In difference in personalities and everything else. So it's the reason why we come together. And I'm also not very disturbed that there was a point that we disagreed, right? We are coming from a very emotional period, right? People are angry, people are not happy with everything after the election, right? Emotions are high, but we need to be able to control our emotions, right? Because of course, with such emotions, if we fail to control them, as Professor said, we might end up in other spaces. So, but I want to thank you again still that we managed to maintain our calm, right? We were not unruly because once asked to calm down, we were able to what? To calm down. It's normal for human beings to be in that space. It's the reason why we're having these conversations nationally, right? Because we need to sit together and talk to each other. We need to sit and talk to people we don't agree with. We need to do that to build a Zimbabwe. Because the reason why we are here is because of the policy of Zimbabwe goods. This is the reason why we're here. This is the reason why since 2000, since independence, we have Gukura Hundi, we have got election violence that has taken place. A lot of people, as Heal Zimbabwe in 2008, is an organization. We went around Zimbabwe after the 2008 elections, and we counted 235 people that were killed between May and July 2008. We did memorial services, meeting the families of people that have been affected, doing tombstones, prayer meetings to try and restore the sense of humanity and sense of community in the rural communities. President Masarira was talking about the rural communities. We work as Heal Zimbabwe in the rural communities. We have NIMBEs that we do, bring people across the political divide. ZANU-PF, CCC, people come together and work together as ordinary citizens. Things change when the politicians descend. You understand? And so we have a responsibility as Zimbabweans to work together. We don't necessarily have to agree with each other. We just have to appreciate and humanize the other. The only problem comes when we other the other. The moment we label each other, that is the moment we lose our humanity. But I want to thank you as an audience for the questions that you asked. But let's not lose sight of why we are here. Let's not lose sight of the objective of this process. It is for us to push for a national dialogue, right? We don't want to have another set of elections that are disputed because there haven't been any reforms. But if we let our emotions get a hold of us, we will go to 2028 with 0 reforms. So that's why we need to sit down, think, and engage with each other. So let's not lose sight, and I want to thank you for taking time to come. Our emotions are still high post-election. This is the reason why we're doing this, so that we're able to contain, to converse, to tolerate, to laugh. At the end of the day, we will build a Zimbabwe that is tolerant, a Zimbabwe that respects the rights of all citizens. And that's the kind of Zimbabwe we are going to build. It's built
at the conversation, at the dialogue table. We all agree? You know, there's a, I know you do, but I want to do one last thing. There's a song that we used to sing in 2007 when we did the Self Zimbabwe campaign that later led to the Government of National Unity. You know, when we were running that campaign, we would sing the song that if you believe, and I believe, and we all believe, and we together pray and work together and converse with one another, and of course, we coming from the church agreeing that, and the Holy Spirit will come down and Zimbabwe will be saved. We want Zimbabwe to be what? To be healed. We want the emotions done. So I'll ask you to just sing with me for the next 1 minute, okay? And then we'll ask someone to pray so that we leave this place peacefully. I'm not very good at singing, but you can also assist. And the song would go, if you believe and I believe, and we together pray, the Holy Spirit must come. In Zimbabwe must be saved. If you ask, if and I believe, and we together pray. So if you all believe, thank you, comrades, thank you, colleagues, thank you, panelists, and also I'll thank Comrade Linda for the courage. You know, it's not easy to come and face all of us, right? With other panelists that were supposed to come, they did not come, right? So while we appreciate our differences and many other issues that might be corrected, we thank you for the courage to come and engaging. We thank comrades for the tolerance and engage with one another. We thank everyone. I think we can call this day a day, and we meet again as we have these conversations in all our spaces. May God bless you and be with you today. Amen.
Later.